Hey everybody, what's going on? I have Randy Peterson here. He covers Iowa State for the Des Moines Register. What's going on, Randy?
Hey, good morning. Everything's good.
Good to hear.
Excited about going to the Sweet 16 again. It's been a while.
Yeah, both teams, very interesting, and we'll talk about how they kind of both got here, double-digit seeds. Let's start right off with just an interesting season Iowa State's had. 2-22 the year before, coaching change, and they got a couple wins here. Let's just, before we get into the season and maybe how they got here, let's just talk about these two tournament games, beating LSU, beating Wisconsin. What's worked in those games as they could try to continue its momentum against Miami there on Friday night. They got that late game, the 10 o'clock Eastern time, Friday in Chicago.
What's worked for Iowa State so far is the defense, and that's what Iowa State's identity has been all season. Is that they're not the greatest shooters in the world. The statistics back that up. So when TJ Otzelberger, the new coach, discovered that this wasn't going to be a great shooting team, they needed to do something else. They needed to find another way that they could stay in games, that they could win games in what all the analytics say is the toughest conference in the nation. So they play relentless defense. I mean, they're double teaming everywhere. I talked to future Hall of Fame coach Lon Kruger yesterday, and I asked him, I got to know him a little bit when he was at Oklahoma. I asked him what most impressed him with Iowa State, and he said the fact that they play help defense as good as anybody he's seen in the nation this year. So that's pretty impressive to me with a team that was not put together until June. I mean, they've got 6 guys on this team who play that did not even know each other in June when they got here. So the fact that they bought into Coach Otzelberger's defensive philosophy, when in fact TJ was here for 8 years, was at Iowa State for 8 years under previous coaches who stressed offense. I mean, who got up and down, scored 80 points a game, especially with the Fred Hoiberg teams. So for these guys to have bought into playing defense and to have bought into each other and trusted each other, that's what's going on with Iowa State basketball right now.
It's really interesting when you talk about the defensive stuff, and Miami certainly has done well on defensive side of the ball. They've kind of made adjustments too. They knew they weren't going to have a big team. They decided to, implement this scramble defense, which Jim Larinagas had for years in the tank. He's used at different stops. They're creating turnovers. Iowa State creates turnovers. And what's interesting too, and I want you to touch on this about Iowa State creating turnovers. And for Miami fans, facing a team that creates turnovers, this might, bring up some memories of how Florida State treated Miami. Miami lost both of those games close, but the games were in the 60s. Florida State is second in the ACC behind Miami in steals percentage, and Iowa State's one of these teams that creates steals. So you're kind of facing a little bit about what you do if you're from a Miami standpoint. And with Iowa State, you touched on the defense. Again, when you're talking about defense, Miami just faced an Auburn team that had shot blocking and height. This is a different type of really good defense. You touched on the help side stuff. Also, one of the things that separates these teams defensively is how well Iowa State's defended the three-point line. What are they doing against the three-point? Because when they're at their best, when they're holding teams down, they're really doing that well in addition to the turnovers.
What Iowa State's doing, they're getting out on the shooters quickly. They're giving up, oftentimes, most times, they're giving up the post. Iowa State invariably gets outscored in the post, so in the paint. So that's a problematic sometimes, but they've been getting out on the shooters very quickly. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this any against LSU. LSU's not a tremendously great shooting team, and plus LSU was in a little bit of a disarray because they were playing with an interim coach. Not to take anything away from Iowa State's performance. Iowa State played great, but so that was going on there, and then Wisconsin. Against Wisconsin playing in downtown Milwaukee, where it was 90% Wisconsin fans. Iowa State, it was interesting. Tom Davis, who coached Iowa a long time ago, always told me that teams that that full court press all the time do not like to be pressed, because that's what Iowa did back with Tom back in the day. Well, so I thought of that against Wisconsin, because Iowa State was just pressuring the daylights out of Wisconsin. I mean, they were banging them, they were physical, and that's kind of what Wisconsin likes to do. And Wisconsin didn't appreciate it. They didn't respond to that well. So that's why Iowa State has been successful in defending the 3-point line for the most part. They've been physical with the against the shooters, and it also goes into what kind of officiated game you're going to get. Also, I mean, if they're calling a ticky-tack type game, then Iowa State's going to have to come up with a plan B. But if the officials let them play a little bit, that's what Iowa State's going to try to do to contain 3-point shooting, is to get physical.
Iowa State's had an interesting season just looking at them. They start out 12-0. They get those non-conference wins, really impressive against some tournament teams, Memphis, Creighton, Iowa. So they're really rolling. Then Big 12 hits. They start out 3-9 in conference, and then they start to get it back going a little bit late. But then again, they had those two performances heading into the NCAA tournament: 36 points, 41 points. They're not, that's not where you want to be ideally. But how could you sum up this season and essentially how they got back to essentially winning games? You bring up a wonderful point. I mean, they lost 4 games during late in the season, and they played horribly. They lost horribly in the Big 12 tournament, like you said. They scored in the 30s. They've scored in the 30s a couple times this year. So, what they've been able to do is just rally around their mistakes. And I know that sounds cliche-like, but it is. But it's true. And the leader on this team, it's about midway through the season, it became clear who the leader of this team was going to be. The vocal leader, the get in your face guy, to a certain extent, get in your face. But the vocal leader of this team, the guy that brings the locker room together, it's a true freshman, Tyrese Hunter. He's the guy that does the talking before free throws, when they huddle up before free throws, for example, or during timeouts when the coaches are discussing strategy and the players are waiting to be talked to by a coach. It's true freshman Tyrese Hunter. So during these low times, Tyrese Hunter pulled these guys together, and it was because of his leadership that they've been able to bounce back. Number one. And number two, now this is kind of important also, that it took Iowa State started the season 12-0. They're 15-0 against non-conference opponents. Why? The 12-0 part was largely because Iowa State's opponents didn't know what the heck Iowa State was doing. They saw on film that they were on video that they were playing defense, but they didn't know exactly what the defense was like until they experienced it. Well, by the time you get to the Big 12 on January 1st, the books, there's a book out there on Iowa State. So I think that had something to do with those lulls as well. Just kind of reading some, and TJ looks like he's obviously has a great, career ahead of him. Touched on some of the stuff he's done as an assistant coach, been a head coach, and now what he's able to do here. It seems like he's definitely got a continued bright future in the game. He talked about, teams spreading them out a little bit at times. I think Sam Wardenberg's Miami's 5-man doesn't score a lot inside, but he's certainly instrumental in passing, setting up the offense a little bit, running Miami's offense through there. I think he'll be a big deal in this. And obviously Miami's guards and keeping turnovers down and things like that. I want to talk about a little bit about Iowa State's the players, and obviously we'll get into Isaiah, but you touched on Tyrese as a player. You touched on some of the intangibles, but first tournament game, you touched on a freshman, 23 points comes out of the gate. He's had one of these good seasons as a freshman. Certainly, what stands out to you? What does he do well, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, to give him some points there?
And let's not forget, he just turned 18 years old. I mean, so this kid's a pup. He's fearless. He's 100% bought into you. Sometimes you get guys out of high school and you get the superstar guys who average 30 or 40 points a game. Well, Tyrese's high school coach is a Bennett, and the Bennett's in Dick Bennett, for example. Everybody knows what Tony Bennett. Everybody knows what kind of teams those guys ran. They all played defense. Tyrese Hunter grew up he told me that there were the first 3 or 4 practices each year, they never saw basketball. So that's where this starts. He said great coaching at the lower levels. but he's not, he's unafraid to mix it up with guys much older than him. He doesn't back down from anybody. And the dagger that he made late in the game against LSU from darn near, it was probably closer to the logo than it was the free throw circle. It was the Seth Curry high arching shot. My gosh, that against LSU that sealed the game. That was incredible. That for a guy on that stage to make a shot like that. He just plays like it's like he's a crafty veteran, when in fact he's still got a lot to learn. He doesn't take care of the ball the greatest, but he has big games in big game opportunities. He's the guy that Iowa State's going to.
Yeah, and you touched on the 23 points, also had 5 steals in that game. Isaiah Brockington. Oh, I forgot to mention earlier, but Lon Kruger, shout out to Pride of Silver Lake there. Isaiah Brockington, really interesting player. I got a chance to see him in the Big Ten there, Penn State, productive player, comes over to Iowa State. Lefty, not nice player, can score. He's kind of a mix, I guess, from Miami fans, maybe a mix between Wong and McGusty in terms of how he gets his buckets there. Can score, can kind of just, he's obviously a key part in what they do, a big part in getting buckets there. What has Isaiah meant to the team, and essentially how important is he for this game?
They call him Midi because he's the mid-range guy. He learned that from his father. His father would not let him shoot. His father, who played basketball back in the day, but his dad would not let him shoot the 3-point shot. He said, you're going to make your money, and it's less energetic. You don't use as much energy when you shoot the mid-range shot. So that's all they shot. He's got a sweet left-handed shot. He has trouble going to his right on the dribble sometimes. But when he's on a roll, he's essentially unstoppable. I mean, he gets in one of those mindsets where everything's the rim looks huge for him, and he's going to take advantage of that. The thing though, he hasn't played great he hasn't played Brockington like in the first two tournament games yet. Iowa State's won, so he's due, for a 25-point game, if in fact that's possible against Miami. But yeah, he's been if there's a second glue guy, there's 3 glue guys. Hunter's one, Brockington's one, and Gabe Kalsher, the transfer from Minnesota, certainly is the other one. But Brockington was with the left-handed shot, just a pull-up guy. If he's shooting a 3-pointer, it's probably going to hit the front of the rim. That's how mindset he is. The 2-point, the mid-range 2-point shot. So I look for him he needs, like I said, he hasn't had a great shooting game in the tournament yet, so he could be due.
Yeah, you touched on Gabe, and he could be one of these X factor guys. He shot 37% from 3 his first 2 seasons in college at Minnesota. Really struggled since, but maybe there's something in there that he could, get that back. It could be one of those factors of like, maybe you don't think you have to guard him, but maybe he gets hot and does knock down some threes there. He had that big game last game against Wisconsin, scoring the bucket. With Miami, one of the things that I feel like is such a big part in this time in basketball in the tournament is playing true to your identity. We've touched out a lot about Iowa State. They are getting back to what they do best with the defense, holding teams to not very many points, turnover, those kind of things. They are getting to what they do. Miami's doing the same thing. They are led by their guards. Those guards are playing well. You touched on Brockington getting hot. And the winner of this game is going to play the winner of the KU Providence game. And KU, for example, is having a little bit of identity thing. They're winning games, but Agbaji's not got going. Now they got Remy Martin in the mix. And it's kind of like, are they going to be able to get back to their identities? And same thing with these two teams as they face each other. You've got to be kind of who you are at this time. One thing, too, Miami's not turned the ball over, and that's what they've done well. Only 7 turnovers the first 2 games. They've done well in that throughout the season. It's not a huge surprise, although those are very low numbers. So if Miami can kind of stay true to its identity, Iowa State, like you said, some of their identity things that they want to do, teams want to play what they are. And I think Iowa State's front court's interesting too. They've got some guys they kind of rotate in, and kind of mismatch. I think the coaching things as this goes on and substitution patterns Obviously, foul trouble can get a big anything. Any final words, Randy? I'll let you get out of here. Any final words on this one? Maybe something we haven't talked about that you feel like, look, pay attention to this. It might be something that to pay attention to if this game's going well for either one of these teams.
Well, yeah, you talked about Gabe Kalschel for just a second. TJ recruited him out of the transfer portal. He knew that he shot 44% from 3-point range as a freshman at Minnesota, and then the 3-point shooting went elsewhere. But his lockdown defense on the perimeter was always there. That was the reason TJ Otzelberger recruited Gabe, and Gabe's been a wonderful addition, to the program. He's been a wonderful guy to get. He's just been a great teammate. So he's that X factor, like you said. A guy I think you have to keep your eye on if you're keep your eye on is Jazz Kuntz. Kid came from Washington State. 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is. He can shoot the 3 ball. He doesn't like to mix it up under the basket, but he can be deadly around the perimeter with 3-point shooting. He doesn't start. He plays, but he plays a lot. But he I think he did start the last game. But he could be deadly on his 3-point shot. And if his 3-point shot's falling, then Miami's going to have to guard 4 positions at least. So I think that could be an interesting person to watch too, would be Jazz Kuntz.
And with Jazz too, I touched on Sam Wardenberg. It's probably going to look somewhat of a mirror image with these two guys, their style of play, maybe even what they look like, just them out there together. Jordan Miller from Miami has been big. Getting points, did that. He's kind of one of these do-it-all guys. He's kind of the X factor for Miami. Certainly their guards, Charlie Moore at point guard, with Isaiah.
Charlie Moore and George Condon have history also from growing up in Chicago together. So that'll be kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, it will. Randy, I appreciate your time is valuable. Thanks for doing the rundown. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll talk to you later, man.
Great. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.